fault. I think something happened when I tried to share that when I tried to share it, so I won't do that again.
It was that website was just so bad.
That's what we're gonna go with. It's
That's
not.
what. Yeah, I think that's a great explanation.
It's not that I messed it up. Okay, so we were finishing talking about things that we might add to our website or ways that we might kind of grab somebody's attention. Because you mentioned something that I thought was very important, and I know it's true for me. When I am looking for a company to do something, I'm going to look at the top 4 or 5 results.
Hmm.
And then they're going to get graded based on their web presence.
Yes.
Does it look professional? Does it not? So when we're thinking about reaching out to a community, we not only want to do like what you said. I really like the idea of you having something with a branding on it to get people familiar with your local church there.
Yes.
But then when they arrive to your website, go through again what you do or kind of what you have on your website to make a favorable impression.
We typically what we have besides our our name and what I would call our logo, I suppose. Um, it's very clean. Unlike the horrid website that shut our live stream down just a few minutes ago, something very clean, and the information is easy to find. The last thing people want to deal with when they finally get to your website, if you're the one that they chose, you want to make it easy as possible that they can read everything. They don't have to go looking. Where is this hidden at? It's all very, and so widgets are great for that. Having, the 5 most recent sermons, having a video from maybe a recent live stream, and then like a welcome video, and even some sort of scrolling banner that gives information, on like a slideshow type thing. But that's it. You don't want to overwhelm someone, but at the same time, you want to provide enough information to keep their attention. I'll tell you who does a good job of this is Wes McAdams.
Mm.
The Wes McAdams site is fantastic because it's very clean, and you know exactly what you're going for when you get there, and
Right.
and it's easy to find. And so he does a great job at that too.
Yeah. So when we think about thank you for the example. You're exactly right. Now, when we think about reaching out to a community and finding new people and attracting them with a website, there's got to be content there too, right? It can't just be
Yes.
pretty.
Right.
So, what kind of content have you found to be the most helpful? Again, for people who don't know who you are, they're just moving into the area. What do you do?
I know what's worked for Fultondale. It again is having the sermons both audio and video, where you're giving people an option to where if they've got the time to watch the video, that helps them get somewhat familiar and associated with you as a focal point, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever they come to visit, I always make it a point, and now I know the congregation as a whole does too. But when I see someone new there, I make it a point to go introduce myself. And if they've already watched the video, they're already familiar with me to some degree, which in a very odd psychological way is comforting to
Yeah.
walk into a place where you feel like you know somebody, sort of, where they've watched maybe a few sermon videos or live streams. But having the audio there is great too because maybe it's something they can listen to on their commute, um, you know, or something like that. And so it works. That works very similar to like a podcast, and so I think that kind of content, the audio, the video, is really important. We do make articles available because I think that's important too. People want to read. I'm not a very good writer, so I don't do a lot of writing. But we still have articles on our website for that purpose. But outside of that, we don't put a lot more content than that on the website. We want to be informative, but we also want to be easy to navigate through at
Yeah.
the same time.
Yeah. And so let's move. And you did that. Let's move from the. All right. They found out who we are, and they're interested enough to come and meet us in person. So when they arrive, I think you hit on something very important. Your web presence ought to make them comfortable with at least one person
Yes.
at the church. So that even if they sit down, and let's just pretend that everybody does, and hopefully it never happens like this, but nobody tells a visitor hello, and they come in, they're totally alone, they don't know anybody. When they come and sit down, and whoever that has been, whether it's the shepherds, the preacher, somebody, when that person arrives and stands up, or they see them, that should be a comforting thing. Oh, hey, I know that person.
Right.
And it doesn't. We're not talking about maybe like a cult of personality. That's not what we mean. You just want something to create a connection between you and the visitor. And like you mentioned, kind of like branding, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But that's comforting when you see things that you're familiar with, things like
Yes.
a logo, a person, a slogan, a phrase, even I don't want to go back to the mid 90s, but even like just knowing what the outside of the church building is going to look like. So maybe like on a contact page, when somebody drives up, just knowing, oh, I'm in the right spot.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
comforting.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's critical. That when someone has finally made the decision to come and to visit, they've done their internet research, they've shopped. I hate to use that word,
Yeah.
but they've chosen to come and give you their time, and that's really the way you have uh, to think about it. Is that they have decided to give us their time? They deserve every bit of ours. Then that I'm able to give to where you greet them. I mean, you don't want to smother them, but you definitely want to make it known that they're there and it's appreciated. And then again, like you said, the comforts of familiarity are super important. Just making them feel like they're welcome there. And sometimes it is just the face they've seen before already. Oftentimes mentally people set themselves up for an expectation
Right.
of some place that when I get there, it's going to be like this because I've seen this guy preach and this is how his personality is. And so you want to try to deliver that in a consistent manner too.
Yeah. So do you guys have at Fultondale? Do you have greeters, like assigned greeters? And if you do, what kind of system do you use for your greeters?
Well, I'll say we have unofficial greeters. We have men and women both who are just good at it, right? And it's kind of an unspoken thing so we don't really have a system per se, but it is something that we talk about often. We talk about it a lot, just how important it is to greet everyone. And so um, it's never been assigned. It's never been a hey, we want you to be in the foyer for this. But those people just tend to gravitate there.
Yeah.
Like before Bible class and after Bible class, that's where you'll find them. You'll find them in the foyer socializing, and when someone comes in, it's an immediate meet and greet. And what now I will say this that consciously myself and at least one of the elders always try to be in that same spot as well, so that maybe we don't see somebody new come in, but then we see one of these people who are so good at this talking to someone new, then we go and introduce ourselves also.
Right. I've heard. I was asking because I've seen a couple different plans, and if you have people who are good at that, like you said, then maybe you don't need to go any further than that. But if that's not the case, one plan that I've heard is that you kind of set up like a three-step system. You might
Mm-hmm.
have somebody at the door to greet them. Hello, welcome. I'm Stephen. Are you new here? And I would always my suggestion would be to use the word new. Don't say, is this your first time here? Just because I've shown up once doesn't mean that I'm not new anymore. And so I could be new for a while. I still don't know anybody just because I've shown up one time, but it wouldn't be my first time anymore. So I like to use the word new. Are you new
Yeah.
here? And then if they are, say, great, we're glad you're here. And then you can take them in and you can introduce them to one other person. And some people will take it a third step. Like you have a second person you introduce them to, and then they'll take them to an usher or somebody like an usher who will help find their seat.
Yes.
I've always thought that three-step system, for me, that was a little, I felt like I was being passed around. But a two-step thing, hey, I'm glad you're here. Let me take you and let me show you to this person, and he can answer any questions you have, and he'll be more than happy to show you a great place for you and your family to sit. And then it seems like a seamless transition from the door to a second familiar face now, and then to a good place to sit. And you want to give the visitors, I think, the best seats in the house, which, depending on the visitor, it might be the back row, or it might be, like sheltered in the middle,
Yeah.
so they feel like they're blending in. And then the third familiar face they'll see is whoever you have, kind of made that point of contact on your website or in the videos or things like that. I don't know, do you have any comments or additional thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on a very key point. Seating is important. And I know that in most congregations, the tendency seems to be the members want to sit in the back, right? If you know, I mean, many places that I've been, either for gospel meetings or just visiting because I was out of town myself, the back is always full. And as you get up toward the front couple of rows, there's nobody. Well, the worst thing in the world, I think, that could possibly happen to a family that's visiting is let's say that they get there late. Now they've got to do the walk of shame all the way up to and sit in the very front row where everyone sees them. Not only are you new here, but you came in late, right? And so that now they feel the pressure of that. And so we always encourage our members to leave those back rows open, and then we try to leave a couple of rows in the middle open if we can. And we really try to focus on getting from the front back full as opposed from the back front. I think seating is critical, especially because even if they're not late per se, you don't want to put a family where they feel like they're on the spot because they're already going to be a little self-conscious that I've never been here before. I don't know anybody here. They're wondering who we are, those sorts of things. And so you want to try to make them as comfortable, I think, as possible.
Yeah, I agree. Uh, Kind of like you were talking about control earlier, and really that control is comfort. I remember one time we were traveling. We lived in Texas at the time, and we traveled to Indiana, and we wound up going to a church in Illinois, and we didn't know anybody there, and they did that really well. Right, there was somebody who greeted us. They brought us in, and we had done our research. Right, like we're looking on the internet for a place. We found where we think we want to go, and it was in Casey, Illinois. We wound up going to a church in Casey, Illinois. And that's what they did. I don't know if it was planned or if it just happened that way, but somebody greeted us. They brought us to a second person who introduced themselves and kind of talked to us. They seated us. They brought us to a place where we could sit. It was kind of in the middle of the church building. And then afterwards, the person who we found, the contact the contact point for that congregation was the preacher. After that, he and his wife noticed that we were new, and they came and talked to us. And his wife actually invited us to go eat lunch with them once she
Mm.
found out that we were from out of state.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like the perfect storm, right? Of bringing somebody new in, and they did it well. I've also been in places where I showed up, nobody tells me hello. I have to go sit on the very front row. And then afterwards, nobody tells me hello.
Yeah.
And I mean, when that happens, I go and introduce myself to people, which is not what should be happening, right? The visitor should not be taking the initiative. Uh, but that makes a big difference. If I weren't hyper interested in being part of a local church already, that would be enough to turn me off.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't want to come back.
Yeah, definitely. I still think back to the first time that Kelly and I visited the Mountain View Church in Cumming, Georgia. I was already very apprehensive going in because at the time of my situation, I was a non-Christian. As a matter of fact, I was an atheist, and so I was already had it in my mind what it was going to be like, and that I was going to walk in and it was going to be immediate judgment. So I already went in very apprehensive. And what I remember the most about that particular night I don't remember what they taught in class. I don't remember the songs they sang. I don't even really remember most of the people that I met face for face and name for name.
Right.
But I do remember how we were treated, and it's critical when you never know who's coming off the street. Maybe they're a non-Christian. That's usually not what we think about. We don't usually think about non-Christians coming in. We usually, when someone new shows up, they're already a believer of some sort, but maybe they're not. And I think that treating people in a way that's going to make them feel welcome um, has a huge impact. I know that it did for us, because then whenever it came time to go again, I wanted to go. I wasn't apprehensive. I wasn't backpedaling at all. I was eager to get out the door and go, because I wanted to find out some more what these people were about. And like you said, I've been in places where no one said a word. Either when I got there or when I left, it was like I could have just not come at all,
Right.
and that would have been fine with them. And that should never be the case.
Right. What do you think about, kind of, again, thinking in the mindset of somebody who's brand new to a town, maybe even an unbeliever, and in this they're like, I'm going to check out this religion thing and see what it's about. So they've come to your website. They're coming to your church building. What are some external things that can help make somebody feel more comfortable? And I'll give you an example of one uh, that we would think, oh, it doesn't matter, but it does, and that's the appearance of the outside of the church building.
Mm.
Right? Like if the grass is tall and there's no landscaping, or there's dead landscaping, or it just looks totally unpresentable. I mean, what does that say to somebody who's just coming for the very first time? What does that tell them? So things like that. What are some ideas that you have that we need to be careful to pay attention to?
Well, I think that's a great one to start with. In real estate, curb appeal is everything.
Mm-hmm.
No one is going to want to go and see the inside of the house if the outside is uncared for. That projects, even in unspoken terms, it projects a mindset of apathy. We don't really care, that sort of thing. And so it's those little things matter. I think too. Obviously, the when they if the outside of the building is cared for, then equally then the inside should be as well. Not that you have to have a $3 million new
Right.
building, but that the inside of your building is cared for. That the bathroom works and the lights work, and there's not some funky smell going on, in there that's going to give someone a headache later, or whatever. So I think just those physical things really matter. Um, and as shallow, we could get very shallow in this, but I still think that it all matters. When I built homes in the late '90s, early 2000s, and I wasn't a builder. I was a project manager for a builder. And one of the things that he stressed with all of the production team, project managers, superintendents, all of us, he said, everybody sells, all the way down to the guy that picks up trash. That guy sells for me, because when a potential homeowner comes in looking for a new home and they see the guy out there picking up garbage, they know that he cares about this community. And so I think that same mindset plays into the entire congregation, that everyone is trying to express the care that we have for this. And I think that it speaks volumes from those physical standpoints.
Yeah, and that's really kind of what we're focusing on, is this idea of showing somebody in a way that they can understand that you care about them and you care about God.
Yes.
And there are lots of different ways that gets communicated, and we have to kind of be cognizant, like you said. I like that picture, that everybody sells. And so everything that we do in some way is an effort of reaching out or establishing an image of a local church. And it's super important that we don't neglect those things. Now, from a spiritual perspective, I mean, does it really matter? I mean, I'm not afraid that I'm going to lose my soul because the landscaping hasn't been done well. You know, that's not at all what we're talking
Sure.
about.
Yeah.
But from an evangelistic perspective, that stuff matters.
Very much. You know, and I think about Haggai, chapter 1, I forget which verse it is, but where he says, you guys are laying in your new homes while my house lies in ruin, right? I forget which verse it is, but that phrase sticks out to me a lot. That there's something projected about God's house lying in ruin, and I understand that it's not about the physical building. It's not about that, and that the church is us. We are the living stones
Right.
that make up the church that Jesus built. But as you said, from an evangelistic standpoint, and people who don't understand that coming in, you want it to be inviting. You want them to want to come inside,
Yeah.
and I think it matters.
So let's move away from the physical now for just a minute, and let's talk about what should somebody see from a more spiritual focused perspective. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I met my wife when I was in college, and she invited me to go to a Bible study with her. And so I brought my Bible because that's what you do. And I mean, I had it was beautiful, leather bound, had my name on the front of it and everything. And I had been to lots of Bible studies, and I always brought my Bible, but we never really used it. So we go to this Bible study and we sit down, and it's on a Friday night. It's in a room full of college students, and everybody has their Bible, and they sit down and they start talking about stuff that I had never heard of in the Bible before. And they weren't doing it to make me feel weird. It just happened to be what they were talking about. But everybody was opening their Bible, and the sound of pages turning in that Bible study, I still remember that sound. Looking around and seeing people turning to Bible passages, being able to make comments from the scriptures. I didn't know if they were right or wrong, but I just saw people opening the Bible and using it and thinking about and focusing on God and what God had said. And to me, having been to and gone to various churches throughout my upbringing, that had a phenomenal impact on me. It told me that first of all, not only was there a room with like 80 college students on a Friday night gathered together for a Bible study, but they all took it seriously.
Oh yeah.
So what other things like that can you think of that we need to make sure that, hey, if you come, this is what you should see?
Well, that's that's a great starting point. Also, is that the sincerity of the people involved. That when you come in, you don't have people who are on their phones, scrolling TikTok videos or whatever. That they're actually, if they're on their phone, they're on their Bible app, right? That they're that they are engaged in this. That it's you talk about hearing the pages turn and all that. What you're seeing there played out in real time is a sincere desire, and so that's contagious.
Yeah.
And the way I think about when evangelism in general, it's about being contagious. You want this fire that I've got, the fire that shut up in my bones. I want to spread it. I want you to catch it too. And so that's contagious. When you see people turning pages, you're like, oh yeah, me too. Yeah, I want to, and I think that's important. Royce brings up a really good point, talking about getting rid of the COC jargon that we use a lot of times. Where we use terms that people are unfamiliar with. That is one thing I do remember.
Like
Where I
alien
was
sinner.
uncomfortable for a long time, with certain terms. Or I'll tell you, the one that used to get me a lot was where, we would have a Bible study and someone would say, oh, well, you remember Hezekiah, right? Back in Second Kings. And I'd be like, nope, don't know who that is,
Mm-mm.
And I think that's also something that we can be very aware of when it comes to keeping the new people that we've attracted. You want to use terms that are relatable, and that
Yeah.
aren't lofty, and above their heads, because we sometimes do that. I don't think in a mean spirited way, or to try to seem condescending, but sometimes it does come off very condescending. And I think that's another great point. And also, Royce just brought up another point about not criticizing a translation. You know, we love to rail on the NIV, but I actually like the NIV.
Me too.
I use it more often than people probably realize, because I think when quoting Bible passages or just simply reading a Bible passage, it's great for that. But you know, obviously, we understand it's not word for word. We know that, but they don't. And I
Right.
think, you know, that, or criticizing them, if someone calls me Pastor Keith, right, I don't have to take that moment right there to say, well, technically I'm not a pastor, and because that's something that can be worked out later. I think those are great points that Royce kind of brought into the conversation here.
Yeah, I agree 100% with all that. Um, I've never seen it beneficial for me to correct somebody who's new.
Mm.
And when you get down to it, there is a very real sense in which language is accommodative. And when somebody says Pastor Keith or Pastor Stephen or whatever, they mean preacher. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
they mean. So it doesn't need to be corrected. And there's also a time and a place for that. And in a room full of people that they don't know, that's not the time or the place.
That's not the time. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so let's talk about. So I want to go back to some of the stuff you said that I think is so important. That I guess Royce brought up. Which, thank you, Royce, for bringing it up. The words and the things in the Bible that people don't know. When we were first converted, we thought, oh, we've got to bring people to services. We've got to bring them to this gospel meeting, because then they'll hear it and they'll be converted. Well, sometimes gospel meetings are mislabeled, right? Sometimes they're not really about the gospel so much as they are about some other topic, which isn't bad.
Sure.
But when I'm bringing somebody who doesn't know anything about the Bible to some very detailed and nuanced discussion, that, first of all, that's probably my fault for not making sure that I was bringing them to something helpful. And secondly, as a local body of believers, we have to make sure that even if we are talking about something that's nuanced or something that maybe isn't quite as common a discussion, we do it in a way that anybody could understand it.
Yeah.
Like, my favorite phrase is alien sinner. For a long time, I had no idea why we cared about the aliens who were sinning. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me.
The gospel's for all.
That's right. That's right. And so it's one of those things where, we can talk about doing bad things, or we can talk about hamartiology. Which one makes sense?
Yeah.
So
doing bad things.
Right. And so we have to be, I can't stress for me personally what a blessing it was to find myself when I first started taking religion seriously. Like, I've got to figure out my life and I've got to figure out what's right. To be surrounded with people who did exactly that.
Yeah.
They never made me feel stupid. There are a few people in particular who did an excellent job of answering all my questions. I never had a dumb question. I mean, I'm sure I did, but they didn't act like it. It was a blessing to have those kinds of people, and that's what we want to be. We want to be a blessing rather than somebody who makes somebody feel bad. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I think that was critical also for me, because, when I came into it, I didn't know anything about anything, and so not just being unfamiliar with terms, unfamiliar with Bible stories. I mean, I didn't know some of the most basic stories, or what we would consider basic stories. I mean, these were all brand new to me. And the man that spent the most time with Kelly and I and taught us really spent a lot of time explaining things, helping us understand the connections and using terms that we could relate to. And like you, so we never felt like we were less than, right, because we didn't know these things. If anything, we felt nurtured and encouraged in the way that we were learning these things. And so I hope that's something that we all will strive to do. But I think it's also critical that we, as preachers, teach that to our congregations too, that it's not just about learning the gospel, but it's also about learning how to teach it.
Right.
To teach someone how to teach is invaluable.
Yeah. And we have to be careful to kind of hit on another comment that Royce made. And this is something that a whole, like what you just said, the role of the evangelist is to, in Ephesians 4, to help the local church get ready for the work of ministry. Same thing with the shepherds. We have to be careful, again, that when we finally get somebody from the community who's interested, that we don't drive them away over something that we can't possibly expect them to understand yet.
Yeah.
So if somebody doesn't even know who Jesus is, criticizing their choice of clothing is probably not the place to start.
Right.
That kind of goes back to the Bible translation. If they don't even know what's in the Bible yet, why would you criticize them for owning a Bible? I remember, and to me, that was a good thing. The Bible that I had, that I carried with me everywhere, was an NIV. And the fact that I brought my Bible to a Bible study, that's a victory.
Yeah, right.
And so why would we criticize them for that? So we just have to be careful. Any other thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, and I think that you touched on it with clothing. I think a lot of times, a new visitor or a new convert, even, they're not going to fully understand the depths of modesty and those sorts of things yet, right? That's something that's done over time, and I think that a lot of time what happens is maybe we forget. Maybe people who have been the quote unquote lifelong Christian has never really even understood the process of converting. When Paul says to the Corinthian brethren, and such were some of you, we read that verse sometimes in such a hurry because we're trying to make the point about whatever sin was listed above, how they just stopped doing it. But what we forget is how long that might have taken. We don't know how long, but there was certainly a process. I know that there was a process for me that, whenever I became a Christian, I wanted to get sober. Well, getting sober was a process, and there's
Right.
a lot of ups and downs, and the same thing with a new convert or even someone who's visiting. Time and consistency and example go much further than coming up to someone the second week they're going saying, you really shouldn't be wearing that.
Right.
That will do so much damage. And like Royce had mentioned, they'll never darken the door again.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned about a process. And I think we see that in the passage you mentioned in 1 Corinthians 6. And such were some of you, but you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified. But I mean, like a page earlier, he's talking about this terrible thing that they're doing. And so it's this whole idea of becoming holy, it's all a process.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes when somebody stumbles in that way, there is a tendency to want to beat them down for it.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing it as a failure forward. They failed. There was a shortcoming, but they're failing forward.
That's right.
They're trying to do the right thing, and they messed up this time. And instead of beating them down, we should be there to pick them up.
That's right. I think sometimes, some of the simple words that we sometimes glaze over, words like striving. Striving implies struggle, right? That thriving would imply no struggle. I'm just full speed ahead. But striving almost implies that there are bumps in the road, that there are times when I've got to stop and take a break, but I keep striving. The word perseverance, we always talk about persevering. Persevering implies struggle. And so, like you said, I love that. I don't think I've ever heard that before, but falling forward or failing forward, or what was it?
Yeah, failing forward.
Failing forward. I love that. That's probably going to be a sermon pretty soon from me. I love that because it's true. That's what we're encouraging to do is, hey, you fell, but you fell this way. Get back up. Let me help you up We love the bootstraps mentality, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, but sometimes people need help.
Mhm.
And I think that you're right. I mean, in shooting our wounded, we don't really help them continue forward. That's a
Right.
great point. That'll preach, Stephen. That's going to preach, as a matter of fact.
Well, that's important. I think it's important, especially for people who have little to no religious background. They're going to fail all the time,
Mhm.
and they need help. They don't need a judge. They need help.
Right.
I mean, I need help. So, I mean, forget about talking about other people. I, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to make mistakes, and I need help. And the people in my life that have been the best to me have been the people who helped me. And I'll be eternally grateful for those people.
Absolutely. I can relate to that very much. That's one of the things that we haven't touched on yet, but brings up a great point. And as far as reaching new people, and when we talk about reaching new people, we're clearly talking about you know bringing them in,
Mm-hmm.
converting them to Christ, and then helping them help us. But it does take the whole congregation. Um,
Yeah.
when I look back on those first couple of years where Kelly and I were being converted out of the world into the faith, it wasn't one person. I mean, it was my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law who were there, who he is now an elder at that congregation. It was obviously the preacher there, but it was also these other families, these other men and women that got involved with us. That was the key thing, is that we had so many people involved with us. We studied with Brownlee on Monday nights. We had Bible study on Wednesday nights. On Friday night, we would be at someone's home for dinner and games, or dinner and a study. Saturday night, usually the same. Then Sunday, lunch with someone after service. Sometimes even Sunday night, we would go out for dessert with someone, just go to Dairy Queen or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so almost every night of the week, except for maybe two, we were with someone, and it was a constant in our life. It became normal for us it didn't dawn us until we started doing other stuff with other people, that, man, we've done something almost every night this week, with people. And I think that it takes a congregation. uh,
Yeah.
it's a congregational effort. It's not just my job or your job, but we're all in.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's one of the most important things that we can stress in the time that we've had today, is that it's not a one person show.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't work. Uh, God God has given us a body of people for that very purpose, so that takes everybody with all their gifts focused on and reaching out to people who are new. That's how it worked in my life. Very much like you said, there wasn't a single person who did something, but it was a series of people uh, who made a huge difference in my life.
Yeah.
And it started with my wife, the woman I married. At the time, she wasn't, but it started with her inviting me to a Bible study, um, and then answering some questions that I had that were really tense questions, but she answered them well. And then when I went to go finally meet these people that she went to church with, they were loving and they were welcoming. They weren't judgmental. And I don't know if I was a big enough person at the time that if I had walked in and it had been a judgmental group, I don't know that my life would have turned out the same.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I
Yeah, I
think.
can agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And you bring up another good point, um, is that she invited you to a study. I don't think sometimes we stress enough with our younger folks to invite people. Um, you know, I've been asked various times. Like I said earlier today, I'm involved with camp and whatnot, and I've given my conversion story a couple times in talks at camp with some of these kids, and I call them kids. I mean, but high school, college age, and you know, some of the questions, or one of the questions that I get a lot is, I didn't become a Christian until I was almost 29 years old. And wow, why did it take so long? You know, and there's a lot of reasons why it took so long, but I mentioned that when I was in high school, I knew a lot of people who were religious. None of them ever invited me to church.
Yep.
No, you know, and I can even remember times where even though in high school, I wasn't sure if I believed in anything or not. I hadn't become an atheist yet. I had a lot of doubts, but with doubts come questions, and I never got any of those answered. And a lot of that was I would hear them talking about, oh, at church yesterday we did this, or oh, we've got this thing coming up at church next week, and I have no idea what affiliation these people were, but I knew that they believed in God and went to church. And what's funny is actually one of the kids that I ended up having throughout camp until he graduated out. Turns out that I went to high school with his mom. She was a member of the church there where we lived, and we figured that out a lot later in life. But I never got invited.
Yeah.
And I wonder sometimes how different my life might have turned out if someone would have said, "Hey, you want to go to church with us Sunday?" Because I probably would have said yes. Just out of curiosity. And I think that that's a huge talking point that we could have with our younger folks is, hey man, just invite people.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of them may say no, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But I had a very similar situation. One of the guys I went to high school with, we met later in life, and we kind of talked about what had happened, and I told him that I was a preacher now, and I told him about meeting my wife and all of that. And it turned out that he went to one of the churches in town, and he apologized to me. And I remember that was powerful. Yeah. He was like, I feel like I let you down. He said, because I was kind of like you, I think, in high school. I believed in God, and I had things that I believed, and I had this path forward in life, but there were a lot of doubts. And so there's a lot of questions that you have. And I don't know what it was, but for some reason he wasn't comfortable inviting me. And so I apologized to him too, maybe for not being the most, invitable person. But that was powerful that he apologized for that.
Absolutely.
Joel made a comment, and I think we should talk about it real quick. He said he's for invitations to Bible study, but he hasn't found it useful or helpful to invite non-Christians to worship. And so I would tend to agree with that, in that if somebody has no religious background at all, that maybe a one-on-one conversation, maybe inviting them over to your house, come over, let's have supper, let's just kind of talk about things, find out where you are. That might be a better starting point. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree and I disagree, because I do think that oftentimes inviting someone to worship puts them in a situation where something could be said, maybe unintentionally, that could dissuade them from ever coming back, right? Mm-hmm. But I also, what we've done at Fultonell is we have a kind of an impromptu class for people who might either be a regular, what we would call a regular visitor, where they start showing up regularly, where the material is already prepared and I'm already the teacher. And if this person shows up like for the second or third time in a row, what we do is we're like, hey, we're having a new class in here. And what we do is we invite them, and we've got 7 or 8 other people who are willing to come in there into the class as well. And so it's set up to be a class that's designed for them, where we talk about some just fundamental principles and nothing controversial and that sort of thing that might go on out in the auditorium. Right. Like you never know what's going to be said in the auditorium in an in-depth class, about the Kings or something. So right. We found that has helped in 2 instances. That we've only had a chance to do it twice, but that has helped. But I think as a rule, I would agree that if you invite them to worship, maybe you just invite them to come to the worship and not necessarily Bible class. I think Bible class is typically where people end up getting offended, because you never know how someone is going to respond to a question in class.
Right. And so then it would depend on how you have it set up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I like that you have that in place to help somebody who happens to show up, because it might be, even if you don't regularly invite visitors to come to worship services, they still might.
All right.
And so that maybe is not a bad idea to have set up
Yeah,
just in case.
it's basically what we would have as a new converts class. It's the same material, where we spend a lot of time in First and Second Peter, just because there's so many good foundational principles in both of those books. And then obviously, if they become a regular, whether they're every Sunday or in every Wednesday, well, then that class then evolves into something else. But we've got enough prepared for, I think 6 lessons, ready, just in case that happens.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, I think we've covered most of the comments. Do you have anything that you kind of want to put out as a closing idea or closing remarks as we kind of draw to an end?
Well, again, I think, as we talked about this morning, I think praying about this is also something that we should be doing. We should be praying for, hearts that are truly seeking change, and are interested in what God has to offer them. I think we should be praying for that. I think we should have some literature on hand, like a little one sheet, card with some very basic information on it, ready to give someone. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do. I mean, the short post on Facebook and Twitter, I think, do a lot of good. And I think that, I don't know. Those were just some of the ideas that I'd have prepared to talk about, just in case they came up.
Yeah.
But I think those are all good ways. But I think it's important to remember that there's typically 3 ways that the gospel is preached, and obviously the first way is with words, right? People are reached more effectively with the words of the Bible, right? Not necessarily my words, but God's words. I don't think what I have to say about the Bible will ever be as powerful or as interesting as the Bible itself. But I do think the second way is your own personal experiences, being able to share with people the things that you've experienced, being able to relate with them in some way to help them see what the gospel of Christ has done in your own life. And then I think just with a practical value, is the third way, showing them the practical value that exists in the Christian life. Yeah. That yes, number one, I'm a child of God and I'm saved, but there are some very practical value-based principles that we enjoy, where I live a life that's for the most part drama-free. That was very attractive to me, probably above a lot of things. When Kelly and I were converted to Christ, we lived I like to tell people it was like living in a tornado, where it's chaos, and it's loud and you never know what's coming.
Yeah.
And being in Christ is pulling us out of the tornado, so to speak, and putting us in a very calm and peaceful place to where I don't have to know what's coming. I don't have to worry about what's coming because I know that it's whatever it is in Christ, it's all good. And so I think those 3 ways are also something we keep in mind. I mean, using the Word of God, sharing our experiences, and also sharing the practicality of Christianity.
Yeah, I like that. God designed people. God knows what's best for us. And so there should be some practical benefits to being a Christian. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's where we'll go ahead and leave it. If anybody has any questions or further comments, you can feel free to leave those. We will get back. We will try to answer every comment and every question. And if people have questions in, Keith, I'll send those to you, and we can get thoughts and comments. And again, it was a blessing to be here. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thank you for letting me. I've had a blast today too. And yeah, my wife just left to go to Atlanta for the weekend, so I've got nothing to do but answer questions.
So perfect. Send your questions. They can be about anything. Ask for explanations of the Trinity, and Keith will take care of that.
We're going to send those to Royce Bell.
That's right. All right. God bless you, brother.
You too, brother. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you.